to further hone Sarah and Chasky's love for baseball, to laugh at the antics of Meira and Ayelet, to watch a newly shored Yehuda turn into a little mensch, and to be there for the first steps of babies Ricky and Toby. In his sermons, my dad would often tell the story from the Gemara in Tainus, where the great sage Choni Hamagal, Choni the circle maker, was walking on the road and came across a man planting a carob tree. And Choni said to the man, "Tell me, how long will it take for this tree to bear fruit?" And the man looked at Choni and said, "Well, about 70 years. And Choni asked the man, do you think that you'll really be around in 70 years to eat from the fruit?" And the man answered, "Perhaps not. However, when I was born into this world, I found many carob trees, planted for me by my father and grandfather. Just as they planted trees for me, I'm going to plant trees for my children and grandchildren." Dad, after just 70 years with us, you've left us an amazing legacy. As we read every Shabbos, Od Yenuvun B'Seva, Deshenim V'Ra'ananim Yihiyu, they will still be fruitful in old age, strong and fresh they'll be. The fruits of your labor and of your amazing life partnership with Mom have not just been planted, they're growing and thriving. And it's our turn now to take your guidance and impart your wisdom to our children and to their children. We'll try to make you proud. Love you very much.
I'd like to ask my mother to come up.
Thank you, David. I didn't know how to capture your father and to sum up the rich and meaningful life, but you did it beautifully, and he would have been so proud. But it's my turn to do it now. And I don't have the words. I loved him so much and respected him so much. I stand before you who admired and cherished his friendship. And in his presence, and words fail. I work with words, yet they are so inadequate. If he were standing here, he would find just the right words to capture the personality and nuances, to comfort those whose hearts are broken, and the words to bring honor and respect to the deceased. He would have done it with great eloquence, yet keeping the focus on the deceased and not on the speaker. Inevitably, people who had never heard him before would ask, "Who is that rabbi?" For he would have touched them and inspired them. How do I sum up the accomplishments and character of the 72 short years we had with him? Let me begin by telling you about the end of his days, and then the beginnings, and then the life in between. At the end, he was treated by some of the most outstanding and gifted doctors at HUP, famous doctors, and caring and talented ones before that. From the most brilliant researchers to the youngest interns who had tears welling in their eyes, each thanked him personally for the privilege of knowing him and for what he had taught them. He impressed them, as he did so many, with his learning and intellect, with his dignity and strength and force of personality, and with his ability to connect to people of all walks of life. In his last days of life, weakened and dozing, he mustered the last bits of energy to relive the early days of his past life. And his joy was visible and palpable. His cousin Ellen, who you'll hear from a little later, had created CDs from family gatherings, celebrations, and trips. And it took him back in time to some of the fondest memories and to where his values and lifelong skills were forged. I got to see the birthday parties I'd only heard about, where he, as the oldest cousin, served as the master of ceremonies and game organizer. No doubt the training ground for the leadership and organizational skills he later honed professionally. Most importantly, they had the people who he loved and those who he truly revered. Cousins who were like siblings, aunts and uncles who were involved in his upbringing, and above all, parents and his dear grandmother, who was always beaming. He was born and grew up in St. Louis, far from the raging Holocaust that was then engulfing European Jews, and that later became a focus of his interest and scholarship. His life in St. Louis was a meaningful and happy one, surrounded not only by loving nuclear family members, but an extended family that served almost as a nuclear one. So connected were they. The family had values, a love of their hometown, St. Louis, a sense of community building, support, and tzedakah, and the centrality of traditional Judaism and its practices and beliefs. And these he absorbed along with a love of sports. The family doted on him and proudly watched him develop the skills, talents, and charm that characterized him throughout his life. The family was proud of him, and he gave them reason to be proud. And he never forgot or took for granted the seminal role they played in making him who he was. He internalized the moral, religious values of the two women in his life who meant so much to him. His dear mother, Sarah Rivka Yolkut, a refined, forbearing, and gracious woman of quiet dignity and humility. And his beloved grandmother, the legendary matriarch, so loved by all, Liba Cherek, Aline Hashalom. I had quite the acts to follow as the next woman in his life. At our engagement aufruf, Mort gave a powerful tribute to his mother, prompting one of my mother's friends to tell me, "A man who loves and honors his mother so much will love and honor his wife." And he did. From our very first date, I knew this was a special man. As he walked me to the door at the end of the evening, and we had talked so much, he said, "I wish you could have met my grandma. She was such a special woman." These two women and the entire family value Jewish learning and secular education. At great personal sacrifice, Morty, Menachem, whoever called him, was sent to Chicago at the tender age of 13 to attend yeshiva, where he thrived and excelled educationally and became a student leader and star basketball player, again, passions he would mark for the rest of his life. He was not just beloved by his family, but by mine as well when he entered it. They quickly came to love, respect, and take pride in him. My sisters were his sisters. My mother, at age 95, is devastated in her loss, as if he was her own child, and wanted so badly to be here today and throughout his long ordeal. My father, Zichrono Livracha, who came from a very different time and different place, connected with him seamlessly, and each influenced the other profoundly. For both families, he was the family rabbi, who could be counted on to enhance the joy of every family simcha, and could organize and give consolation at the time of family loss. Professionally, his career of 40 years in Chicago, Detroit, and then Philadelphia was a distinguished one. He saw himself first and foremost as a teacher, whether from the pulpit or in the classroom, and he was a master teacher at all levels of education, whether it was congregational preschoolers whose eyes lit up when he engaged with them, or elementary and high school students from Beis Yaakov all the way to public school students. For he challenged them and they rose to the challenges he posed. And his career at the college level at DePaul University and most recently at Temple, where students came early to get a seat in the main room. He simply connected to all and took them where they were at. His lessons were stimulating and marked by a wonderful sense of humor, and he was always thoroughly prepared. This morning, I received a note from the head of the program at Temple, speaking of the students there. I quote, "I know they will be deeply saddened by the news and will wish to express their love. My heart is with you. He was a wonderful man with enormous talent. He captivated a room like few people could. His popularity became so large that we routinely had to simulcast his classes into a second room because he overflowed our largest room. Please pass on to your family our great appreciation that Rabbi Yolkut was able to share his wisdom and talent with us for a few years. We couldn't get enough of him. He will be deeply missed. Adam Brunner." He was unique in being comfortable with people from all walks of life, without judging them, whether it was with the little children or with the President of the United States, representing the American Jewish community. He was equally at home, honored yet never taken with himself. He was equally comfortable in the halls of academe where he studied and taught, as he was in the study hall, the Kotlei Beit HaMidrash of the yeshiva, and equally comfortable with heads of state and with the Novominsker Rav, who officiated at our wedding as the Masader Kiddushin, and he extended the same caring and respect to the humble individual as to the prominent power brokers. He believed in justice and fair play and practiced it. Our marriage, too, spanned 4 decades, during which our love grew and deepened. We were soulmates and confidants, Re'im Ahuvim, loving friends. He was the rock of my life, and I depended on him for so much. His wisdom and insight, his balanced perspective and level-headedness, his judgment and guidance. We shared so much, and his joys were mine, except for sports. And mine were his. We were as one, and now I have truly lost my better half. I am blessed to have had him as my husband, and he will live on for me through his sons, Danny and David, who carry on his legacy. I think you just heard that. And we're such a source of pride. We call it nachas for the men of principle and shared values they had become. Though acutely aware of the difficult and sometimes painful aspects of the pulpit rabbinate, he was so very proud of Danny's accomplishments as a rabbi. He was equally proud of David's professional career. He beamed at the sight of his son in the Supreme Court of the United States, proudly wearing the kippah of an Orthodox Jew. For that was his ideal, to be fully engaged with the world, yet maintaining the values, traditions, practices, and principles of our beliefs and our Torah. It is the cement that binds his past in St. Louis to our sons and their families. He successfully transmitted the legacy that was entrusted to him in St. Louis to his sons, and we pray to their children. A quarter of a century ago, I paid tribute to my husband at a gala congregational celebration in his honor. I ended my tribute with a well-known story from the Talmud. Danny invoked that same story at his wedding, and I invoke it again at this very sad occasion. We believe that a chut hamishulash, a three-corded twine, lo bimheira yinatek, is not easily severed. And so I share this story with you because it is so apt. The Talmud Ta'anit relates a parable of a traveler who, passing through a desert, grew weak, weary, and hungry from his journey. He came upon a tree whose fruit was sweet and its shade pleasant, and at whose foot there flowed a stream. After refreshing himself, resting and eating of the fruit, the traveler sought to thank the tree. "Oh, how shall I bless you? Shall I bless you with the sweet fruit? Your fruit is sweet. With a nourishing stream? You have it. My blessing to you is, may the saplings you planted be like you. Menachem, you have planted your trees, and though you will not see the fruit that it bears, you have done your life's work. You have done it well, and now rest. We will miss you so very much, and we pray that from your place in Gan Eden, you will see the fruit of your labor, and it will be good. Amen."
Representing my grandmother, Margot Schlesinger, my aunt, Dr. Sabine Himmelfarb.
My mother, Margot Schlesinger, provided me with her own words to share today. She very much wished to be here, but she is unable to travel. She wrote, "My dearly beloved son-in-law, Menachem, I want to speak to you about my memories of our life together. I remember when we had just returned from a family wedding where I had broken my leg while dancing. My leg was in a cast and I was sitting at home in some pain. Aline and Morton came in together and told me that you had just become engaged. And I said, for every bad thing that happens, something good happens. Menachem's Uncle Fred was a bachelor, and you immediately called to tell him about the engagement. And you said, if you're standing, sit down, I have news. I'm getting married, and it was such a simcha. I remember what a beautiful wedding you had, and how that was the beginning of us sharing many good times together, your many simchas and many Yom Tovim. Your babies were born, and we enjoyed the most beautiful brisim. Danny's bris was in Lincolnwood Congregation, where you were the educational director. There were so many guests, there was hardly any room. David's bris was just as beautiful as Danny's. And years later, at Danny's bar mitzvah, which was a 3-day affair, you spoke so beautifully. My friends from Chicago joined us there, And then came David's bar mitzvah, which was just as beautiful, and I shept so much nachas. Then I remember when we had our 40th anniversary and you came to Chicago and you spoke so beautifully at our synagogue. And then our 50th anniversary, where my friends could not stop raving about how beautifully you spoke. When you were installed as rabbi in Philadelphia, we came and had so much nachas from you. I remember how they honored you for Israel Bonds and how proud we were of you again. You also invited us to vacations in Michigan, and the boys went swimming, and we had so much fun. And I remember how you used to tell me that I would make a good Rebbitzin, and how good that made me feel. You have to know my mother to know that she would make a good Rebbitzin. I remember how proud you were of your family and of our family. You cherished each of our grandchildren, which gave us nachas too. May you be a guter beter, a melitz yosher for all the family. You are embedded in my heart forever. And most important thing is that I know that you and Aline were soulmates and that your legacy will live on forever. May you rest in peace. I love you with all my heart, Menachem. And I would like to add just a very short thing, although I was told there were many speeches, but it's a poem about grief, and it's by Esther Serebryensky. Tears speak what words can't say. Death tears one's heart. Death tears one's life. It's not real. It didn't happen. It is a lie. I don't believe it. But his voice still rings in my ears. His presence is still felt nearby. I seem to see his face in a crowd. Oh God, why? Yet his soul lives on, not in the physical frame, but in the light from his life, his goodness, his kindness, his caring, living on in those to whom he gave his time, his support, his encouragement. Those he loved will keep alive the actions that he inspired, the deeds that he taught us. A time will come, we will meet again, revealing all we did that he inspired and that he taught. Deeds speak what words can't say. I'm going to add a short thought of my own. We thank you, Menachem, for all you meant to us, our beloved brother-in-law, our children's uncle, and our family rabbi. We'll miss you and find comfort in seeing all the greatness of your life by remembering your deeds and in seeing the children and grandchildren who follow in your footsteps. Thank you.
We'd like to ask our cousin, Dr. Helene Stark, to share a few words.
Aline, Danny, and David have extended to me the extraordinary honor to speak today to represent the Cherek family and to give honor to my cousin Morty, Menachem Fischel ben Aaron HaKohen V'Sara Rivka. It was always Morty's role at family smachot to give some historical perspective by reviewing the Cherek family history and its meaning to us. Although I can't possibly do it in the inimitable fashion that he did, it feels appropriate to talk briefly about these early days. Memories, indeed remembering, is a biblical imperative. Even the Ribbono Shel Olam, the master of the universe, judges us with mercy because he remembers the depth of the relationship we had as a youthful nation. Zacharti lach chesed ne'urayach. And Shlomo HaMelech in Mishlei, Proverbs, states, Chanoch lanar lefi darko, gam yaskin lo yasur mimenu. Educate each child according to his needs, that is, in a way that best suits him. Why? because even as he grows to old age, he will not waver from the lessons of his youth. We will remember best what is inculcated in us as children in our formative years. Because these life lessons gained by experience and osmosis are what made us, Morty and me, Myron, Sal, Abe, Jordan, Shlomo, Merle, Ellen, Alfie, 10 cousins into the people who we are today, and by extension, Danny, David, and their children, and by now a long and growing list of cousins in the next generation. During the turbulent and dangerous years in Eastern Europe following the First World War, Shlomo Moshe and Liba Cherek fled to Dublin, Ireland. He from Zagreb, Poland, she from the famous Jewish community of Bialystok, both from staunch Litvak stock. Liba and Shlomo Moshe Cherek, our grandparents, emigrated and settled in St. Louis, Missouri after the First World War, following the path of some distant Cherek cousins. Life was difficult. The Chereks didn't have much, but they never wavered from the Torah true principles. Shlomo Moshe, our grandfather, never held a real job in St. Louis because he refused to bend and would not work on Shabbat. Lately, having recovered some old photos from the late 30s, all of the Cherek cousins found themselves catapulted back into our family history. This sudden wave of nostalgia was heightened by a set of old movies, voiceover by Uncle Bill, that Ellen distributed recently. We all found ourselves reflecting on the meaning of this history. And now I must fast forward to Morty's role in the family's history. A first grandchild, a grandson no less. Morty's birth was heralded as a harbinger of joyous times, a new future, a golden boy in the golden Medina. All of our hopes were tied to Morty. He was always the golden boy. He was first to go away to yeshiva, as we've mentioned many times here. He was the first to pursue advanced Torah study. He was the first to merit attaining his smicha. We all attended that momentous occasion. Not only was Aunt Sarah filled with pride, but I remember even to this day my father, Olav Shalom, Yisrael Zundel, Ben Shlomo Moshe, his excitement that not only his beloved nephew Morty, but that the entire Cherek family had attained this lofty goal, a goal that would have seemed unreachable when Shlomo Moshe and Liba first glimpsed the Statue of Liberty well before 1920. True, in my earliest years, Morty seemed much older, but by the time I was in my mid-teens, that gap had narrowed. All of a sudden, we became closer, more like siblings. We were confidants, in the best sense. Aline knows this. We depended on each other. When Morty would come home from Skokie for vacations or holidays, we would spend hours together, and somehow, despite time and distance, and despite the fact that we saw each other not that often, we maintained in our collective memory the depth of the relationship fostered in our youth. I remember one of our most beloved encounters. Norman and I were dating. I took him to Chicago for Shabbos to meet Morty and to get his stamp of approval. It was sort of a proba. Morty lived on the south side of Chicago then, and Aline was years away from appearing. Morty owned one dairy spoon, and one dairy coffee cup, so we all shared. Aline can corroborate. I don't think Morty had any interest in a dairy meal, ever, right? But it was important to both of us that Morty take Norman into the family, and we were engaged soon after. And the Rabbanu Shalom